It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. Our brotherhood of man. Oh yeah. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Sing it loud one more time. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will live as one.
I'm going to allow myself a sentimental moment. I've been away for months, it feels like. 10 days down in Kansas City working with a ministry team on which I serve for Unity Worldwide, which puts Unity Cedar Rapids on the map. It's called Licensing and Ordination. My favorite team, actually. It's called Licensing and Ordination. So I did that work for 10 days, and then my buddy Reverend Aaron and I got on a plane and flew to San Antonio, which is where the Unity Worldwide People's Conference was this year. And so we're surrounded by folks from ministries all over the country and all over the world, from Nigeria, from Canada, from Ethiopia. That's all I can think of right now. And I'm privileged to attend that conference because this board of trustees and this congregation supports sending your minister to refresh herself, to network with colleagues, to learn what we're doing that other people hadn't even thought of, which is always a very cool thing, and to learn what other ministries are doing that we haven't thought of. So I'm saying all of that to say how sweet it is to be home. You know how at the beginning of a service we say, welcome home to Unity? Every ministry just has its own culture and has its own vibe. And of course, having been around here for 30 plus years, I can remember Jan Armentrout standing on the platform leading us in alive, alert, awake, enthusiastic. And now, because of Jan, we have Nancy, and then here's Jan toddling up to sing her little heart out and using all of her strength and love and energy to do that. So I know you do. She says, I enjoy every minute, and we enjoy you all every minute. The sweet, sweet sound of our women's choir and really getting the metaphysics of what that harmony means. So enough already. I could go on. I'm just extra happy today. Just extra grateful. So in terms of seeing what only I can see, today we are learning about one of our 12 divine powers called imagination. I looked it up 105 years ago. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore first wrote about the 12 powers. First person in our time that helped to make us aware of these gifts. These 12 powers are also known as our faculties, our 12 gifts from God. The more modern Reverend Phil Pearson calls them the 12 freedoms. And the deal with these 12 powers is they are inherent in all of humankind. Each and every one of us comes into this world embodying each and every one of the 12 powers. So it's really important that we understand not only what they are, how they work, what they mean, and how we can best use them in our lives. Every faculty has a body point, a color, associated disciple, and a definition. So our color for imagination is sky blue, light blue, which is great because the sky's the limit. And the associated disciple is a guy named Nathaniel. There's a cool little story about that, about Jesus seeing Nathaniel meditating under the fig tree before Nathaniel came into his actual vision. It's a very cool metaphysical story. Nathaniel later became known as Bartholomew. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why people switch up names in the Bible. After they have some sort of transformational experience, somebody changes their name. And the body point is our third eye. So here's what imagination is about. It's a very big part of our day-to-day creative process in life. And with our imagination, we have the ability to give shape and form to substance, to invisible spirit energy. Once upon a time, some genius imagined that they could design some sort of gizmoid and hook it up to some sort of machine that would carry voices through a sound system. That's imagination. Seeing it first, seeing the idea first in mind. You know, we use imagination incessantly, don't we? I mean, just a bazillion times throughout the day. So we might anticipate a particular encounter with someone, and we imagine how we're going to approach that, what we might say, how they might respond, what our response to their response will be. And don't we imagine that all sorts of different ways, depending on what our relationship is with that person? how sticky it is, or how contentious it is, or how loving it is. So when we have these imaginations about the encounters, do they go sideways in our mind? Or do they just go swimmingly and in great harmony? For instance, how many of us in our minds, in our imagination, we're thinking about a subject or a topic that has been recurrent in our primary relationship? So in our mind, we want to approach this again. We want to get to some agreement and some consensus. And so in our mind, we bring up the subject and we imagine what our life partner or spouse says back. And so we've already had a fight in our minds before we even get home from work. Anybody ever done that? And who among us has imagined having a conversation with your boss? Maybe asking for a raise, maybe telling them, thanks a lot, but I'm out of here. Maybe asking for extra paid time off, extra benefits, something like that. Now here's an imagination trigger. Phone rings in the middle of the night. Where does our mind go with that? Before we have even reached to pick up the phone, how many of our loved ones are dead in a ditch? Or another good one, I've had this experience, a spin out on an icy highway. How many of us in our minds are dead in the ditch before our car has even come to a stop? Imagination is fascinating, very powerful. It's a series of pictures that originate in our minds and then they play out on the movie screen of our lives. So in a spiritual sense, what is this imagination? How can we really intentionally and consciously put it to use? Imagination, our ability to give shape and form to substance. Substance is the primordial soup out of which everything comes. Substance is God energy, it's life energy, it's spirit energy, it's source energy, invisible stuff. And out of that invisible stuff comes shape and form because someone imagined it. Let's start with a quote from Charles Fillmore. Just in plain English. You know how Fillmore wrote. Man is continually making and sending forth into his mind, body, and his world about him living thought forms, embodied and endued with his whole character. Got that? These images are formed in the front brain, and they are clothed with substance and life drawn from the very subcenters in the body. So if you were going to explain that to a 5-year-old in everyday terms, you would say, here's the thing, Josh, you are an imagination machine, and these divine ideas bubble through your mind and form pictures and come out in your life all day long. And you give those ideas energy. How many love to play imagination with little people? I am bound and determined that my grandchildren will have the most vivid imagination ever. We don't do media, we don't do television, we play games, we play characters, we have roles. I have been a lot of things in their little lives. And my least favorite thing is the dragon because I have no knees left at the end of the day. So imagination, we are that bubbling machine pouring out these divine ideas. And the divine ideas have pictures behind them. right? And then Fillmore goes on to say, the spirit of truth projects into the chamber of imagery, into the third eye, right? The spirit of truth projects ideas that, rightly understood, will be a sure guide for all people who believe in the omnipresence of mind, capital M, God mind, divine mind. What are you laughing about? God mind, divine mind. Do you have ideas bubbling, Josh? Always. That's what I was saying last week at Unity Village Chapel. It's one of my favorite questions. What does God do all day? Have you ever asked yourself that question? I digress. What does God do all day? God thinks. God ideates all day long. What do we do all day and all night? We think. We ideate. Okay, where were we? So we were talking about Fillmore and that we're this divine idea bubble machine, and in back of that, in back of what's going on here, is divine mind, is God mind, is divine idea. You know how I sometimes refer to life as a screenplay that happens up here, and then it just plays out before us, and you know, from time to time we watch the movie and go, who wrote that crap? And then other times we think, man, I don't think I could have imagined anything this amazing, anything this beautiful, anything this sweet. So can we see how our thoughts, our feelings, our ideas, our beliefs outpicture in the movie that we call life? And let us always factor in, because this always comes up as a question later, not only are we talking about our consciousness, we live in a collective consciousness, yes? And we are all influenced. We're all sitting in this energy field. And our friends out in live stream, and we'll be on podcasts later, they share our energy field. So by consciously using this faculty of imagination, we can co-create a life that is in greater alignment with divine mind. We have fewer and fewer instances where we're asking, who wrote this? Where did this come from? Where was the editor when I needed it? William Warch, in How to Use Your 12 Gifts from God, wrote, imagination is the eye of the consciousness. I love that. And there's a really cool scripture I need to lock into my brain where it is. But Jesus talks about seeing with a single eye, talks about seeing with our spiritual eye. So imagination is the eye of our consciousness. It is our ability, hear this, it is our ability to perceive limitless possibilities of our good. Limitless. Divine imagination is that point in our consciousness that we can touch, feel, and see our highest desires made manifest in our lives. Has anyone had the experience of realizing a divine idea made manifest in life? We use the creative process consciously or unconsciously, and the more conscious we become, what's the rest of that sentence? The more conscious we become, the greater becomes the expression of the divine idea and of the imagination. So through divine imagination, we can see beyond relative appearances. This is the kind of stuff that comes up in counseling almost every single appointment. With imagination, we can see beyond dis-ease to wholeness. Yes? My friend Rick Nash, long time Unity peep, always says, our job isn't necessarily to set it right, but it's to see it right. We can see beyond disease to wholeness. We can see beyond lack to having enough. To having enough whatever. To having enough love, to having enough peace, to having enough time, to having enough sleep, to having enough food, to having enough money. We can see beyond loneliness to feeling connected and being connected. We can see beyond fear to courage. We can see beyond criticism, judgment, critical judgment, to compassion and divine love. We can see beyond chaos or distress to order and peace deep in our souls. We can see beyond hate, disgust. We can see beyond all of that to love. The bottom line of imagination is that we can see beyond what we think are our limits to limitless possibility. Sky's the limit. And we all know the sky doesn't end, right? It just keeps going and going and going. Didn't I just read this week that some space person discovered hundreds of more planets? And we think we're the only ones. I find that kind of amusing. So I say that divine mind, source, life, God, spirit, speaks to us in the language that we best hear. I'm just going to take a wild guess, Nina, and I'm going to guess that spirit speaks to you in notes. Music falls out of the sky, right? Through you, and singer-songwriter. I was asking my friend Erin, there's a song that we were talking about, and we were talking about a subject, and I said, those are words to a song. And she said, yes, they are. And I said, what usually comes first to you, the word or the song? And she said, well, typically I get the word, and then the melody comes in after that. Spirit speaks to us in the language that we best hear. I recommend having our volume on and our antenna up at all times. Does anyone here feel like they've ever perceived a divine idea in a picture, in an image, in a vision? Anybody ever dream? Fillmore wrote a lot about imagination and dreams because that's how he received so many of his downloads. The important thing for us to remember is that if we can picture something in mind that doesn't yet exist, we haven't yet experienced it, but we can picture it in our mind, it's divine idea being made available to us. We can see only what we can see. And when those divine ideas come in, what we're talking about is working with energy. We're working with substance. So our divine idea may be a song, maybe a book, maybe a poem. It may involve raising money to support a spiritual community. I will never forget the day that the moment that the prayer-a-thon was born, and sitting beside Josh in a board meeting and watching that show up on his screen. I was immediately interested. What is that? And he said, I don't know yet. Our divine idea may involve magnetizing a life mate, a partner in our lives. Our divine idea may involve magnetizing people together to complete a dream, to complete a project. So the process is that we attach our faith, ability to bring from the invisible to the visible. We attach that to our ability to perceive a divine idea, to imagine it as reality, and to bring it to fruition. Now, all sorts of things come into play, right, in this creative process. Did you know, Jesus said it a time or two, the kingdom is at hand. The kingdom is in your hot little hand. The kingdom is your divine inheritance. The kingdom belongs to you. You live in the kingdom. A lot about the kingdom. Always talking about the kingdom. And do we get it through our noggins yet? That the kingdom is our inheritance. Had a wonderful session this week where someone said to me, you know, I really can't afford to dream because they don't come true. But if I can't have my dreams, I'd rather just, and their voice trailed off. So what gets in the way of our dream? What gets in the way of our kingdom? Core beliefs. Listen to that core belief. My dreams don't come true. So we go back to like, when's the first time you remember thinking that? When's the first time you remember knowing that? I remember being a very little person and saying, I wish, and my mother saying to me, you wish too much. And like very small, and I remember thinking, well, how can that be? How can you possibly? Because wishing is like seeing it, imagining it, right? So if you're feeling like your divine ideas are not yet manifesting in your life, if you're feeling a little afraid to dream, I suggest that you get with someone to help uncover and investigate those core beliefs. Because once they're apparent, we have ways, surgical, spiritual surgery, we have ways of removing that core belief from consciousness. And of course, our thoughts and feelings color our imagination, right? So bringing a divine idea to fruition depends on how we use our 12 powers. And we've covered, this is our 6th one that we've covered this year. And conveniently, they all fit into the creative process. Divine idea occurs. Words come, a melody comes, a picture of an experience comes, and we activate wisdom. Wisdom center right here at the apex of the rib cage. We activate wisdom so that we are in perfect alignment with divine mind, knowing that we know that this divine idea is ours, that this divine idea is for the highest good. And then we turn to activating our faith, which is the center of the brain, and through our faith, we bring from the invisible to the visible. And faith and imagination are what Reverend Phil Pearson called the dyad. They work very closely together. We have faith that we can bring from the invisible to the visible, and through our imagination, we give shape and form to the invisible energy. And of course, we activate strength, the base of the spine, knowing that we stand in our spiritual character of carrying out this divine idea to the very highest of our ability. And we stand in strength knowing that once we hold a divine idea, that we can persist. Never say die. Never give up. Stay with it. It's yours. Bring it in. Okay, so Hausman wrote Your God-Given Potential, and she talks about that movie screen thing, so I wanted to share it. We have what amounts to a continuously running moving picture show being shown on a screen in our mind. Here we view our world, review past events, ad nauseum in parentheses, I added that, and project future experiences. If we project flickering images of first one thing and then another into our inner theater, we will express or attract a mixture of experiences, good and bad. Go figure. However, by learning to make the right use of this important faculty and by making sure it is continuously guided and directed by Christ mind or divine mind, we can develop an imagination that will not only serve us well, it will also provide tremendous support in developing other God-given powers. And about that, eradicating those false beliefs, she says, in order to change conditions in our mind, body, and affairs, we must first transform the pictures that we hold in mind. Our life and affairs will always flow into the mold we make for them through the use of our inner picturing power. How big is your vat? Is it a teacup? Or is it an ocean? If we don't like the conditions we are attracting or manifesting, we change them by building new images with the eye of the mind, the faculty of imagination. You know, speaking of dreams and visions, many, many years ago, it might have even been my first silent retreat after I came here in the fall of '07. This very clear vision came to me about this ministry and a cultivation and growing project. So over the last 3.5 years, a dedicated team called the Dream Team has been at work. And we're imagining UnityCR as a spiritual community of spiritual travelers who feel connected to one another, who feel engaged in service, both in this arena and out in the arena of our lives, and who feel equipped to show up in life, everyday life, as the light of God. And we've been looking at what we guess are the core values at UnityCR. We had some focus groups with several people to kind of check the imagination and check the vision. And as we're culling through that material, we're discovering that we're pretty much on track with the consciousness of the whole community. So the nitty-gritty work, the strength and persistence, comes in as we explore systems and processes and programs that will enable this ministry to be an even deeper expression of what we stand for. You know, years and years ago when I sat down with Martha Creek, my mentor, and talked about what we could create here, she said some things to me, and I didn't have a piece of scratch paper, so I grabbed a Kleenex box and wrote it on the box of a Kleenex. And while I was gone, our offices were magically transformed. Thank you, Scott. And whoever else lifted and tugged and moved and hauled. I was putting my office back together late the other night, and I found the Kleenex box. It's on my shelf. Find what you do well and dig deep. In the 12 Freedoms, Reverend Philip Pearson reminds us that Source cares for us. God, spirit, life, love, law, mind, principle, cares for us. And I say always and in always. Some might ask, well, how much will God care for us? Like fulfilling this vision? Maybe I could count on that. Or fulfilling this vision. Pearson says that God will provide for us to the degree that we use our imagination. And I do know that as a spiritual community, we all stand together in this collective consciousness. So as we're heading into our meditation time this morning, I invite the question, ingesting what we know about the power of imagination for us as individuals and for this community that we know as UnityCR. What are the possibilities? What can we imagine about ourselves, for ourselves, about this community and for this community? As we take a nice, complete breath and settle into the seats, we give grateful notice that we are fully supported in this moment. We sit in a building that protects us from the elements. We sit in a building that was a picture in people's minds some 35 years ago. We're swimming in an ocean of divine idea. So I invite us to energetically turn on our back and turn ourselves to the universe, floating in our veritable ocean of idea, of imagination. Open our receptivity. Notice. Simply notice what comes to us in the silence. Be still and know that I am God. And so it is. Amen and amen.
Do you love the Lord? Do you love the Lord? Do you love the Lord?